Welcome back. My name is John, and you're listening to the Purple Worm podcast. The answer to the question, why aren't there more podcasts where 4 British guys, or in this case 5 British guys, talk about RPGs? Welcome back to the Purple Worm. I'm John Lodge of Red Dice Diaries. I'm joined as ever by Dave Aldridge of D Percentile, Pete Jones of Dragons Are Real, and of course Colin Green, aka Spike Pit. And it's my pleasure to introduce our very special guest host for this episode, Spencer, aka Free Thrall of the fantastic podcast Keep Off the Borderlands. So, welcome and thank you very much again for joining us, Spencer.
Thank you very much. No, thank you.
I know you, in your podcast, Spencer, obviously part of the name, Keep Off the Borderlands, and you've sort of mentioned a number of times that your actual gaming experience, certainly when you started, was fairly limited. So what was it that gave you the impetus to actually start your podcast?
I've sort of jokingly come to think of it as getting into the hobby by creating a podcast first and then working backwards from there. But essentially, I rediscovered some old books that I had from the 80s. I used to play MERP.
Hi, Future John here, and for those who are not aware, MERP is an acronym standing for Middle Earth Role Playing.
And I came across some books up in the loft and thought, I wonder what's going on with the hobby. Went online. I have spoken about this to some extent in my episodes, but just discovered the community, caught the tail end of G+, just as everyone leapt over to MeWe. I kind of got in there, realised that you can get pretty much anything as a PDF now, which that was one of the big problems as a kid, was finding gaming shops. The nearest one to me was about 20 miles away, and just the material so easy to get hold of. There's so much free stuff as well, which is so just sort of rediscovering the community. Then I think I discovered Anchor through MeWe, started listening to Colin, and I think it was Ray Otis as well. The first couple of podcasts I came across, and I'd probably heard you as well, John.
I've got a question for you, Spence.
Yeah, sure.
Where does the nickname Free Thrall come from? Yeah,
please. Thank you.
Just I don't know. Me trying to be clever, really. Just a free slave. I think it came from me. I did one of those DNA tests and discovered that I'm kind of half Celtic, 35% Scandinavian, and 15% Italian or something. And obviously thralls are the slaves of the Vikings, who are essentially Celts, a lot of them.
I reckon they've done you there, Spence, mate. I reckon I could have come up with that. I could have come up with that profile. A few Romans, bit of Viking.
That's it, isn't it? It's like,
So is it the thing I've always wanted to? We're going to analyse this now, but the thing I've always wanted to ask is, hailing from the part of the country that we do, Spencer, is it deliberately intended that when you try and say free thrall, you actually say free for all?
Well, yes, that is in there too. I do like things that work on several different levels.
It certainly does.
Nice.
Okay, now looking at my notes, Spencer, I can see that you've fairly recently picked up a 5th edition starter set. Is that right?
Oh yes, the Rick and Morty one. Yeah. I just thought that. Well, I'm a fan. And
likewise, and I know you've mentioned this on your own podcast. I wondered, had you had a chance to look at that in more detail? Have you got any more opinions about that?
I've had a flip through it. There's a nice set of dice there, I can tell you that. And it's quite a nice little package. It's quite simply put together. It's not high production value. It's very similar to the Essentials set, but you got a nice set of I think it's 11 dice, so you've got 2d20s and 4d6s in there, which is nice. And the actual rules themselves, you've got kind of panels down the side with Rick making digs at all the little rules, which really tickles me. And I just thought, if I've not played 5e, I've not got any 5e, and I thought if I'm going to get anything, it's going to be this. So, I don't know. I think I surprised Pete recently. Sorry, Pete, when I disclosed that I haven't actually GM'd a game before.
Yeah, that's right, because we put out a challenge on one of our episodes for you to run into the odds to us, and none of us here knew that you hadn't GM. We just assumed you were an anchorite and that you were a GM. But the rest of us...
Well, that's it. You've discovered my true identity.
It's funny though, because it's quite an assumption. It's quite an assumption to make. I don't quite know why we would have assumed that.
I think, Colin, it's partly because a load of us, like, sort of crusty, like, OSR geezers have all sort of, like, we were the people who ended up, like, GMing because, like, we had the books. I certainly know that's why I started GMing, and I GM'd loads of games before I ever played one. So I think it, certainly from my point of view, if, like, I hear someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about, I naturally assume, oh, you must have GM'd some games. Which,
or they're a bullshitter.
Which, to be honest, if you're like a masterclass bullshitter, I assume you've probably run a lot of games.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I certainly haven't attempted to pass myself off as a GM. I think I've tried to kind of be quite open about the fact that I do lack experience, and I haven't got a lot of play under my belt either. So I'm very much a noob in that sense.
I think as we were saying earlier, though, often that can be quite interesting because you come to games without some of the baggage that we've like accumulated over the years playing various games.
Well, if you think back to when most of us started GMing, we'd never played before. It was, we got the books, we don't know how this works. No YouTube. It was right. Let's see what happens, and everybody was looking at you.
Yeah, I've got to admit. I mean, personally, I'm quite sort of envious of people who are starting GMing now, and this isn't a sort of like, oh, we had to GM like the old school way back in the days. I forget what I was saying. Like, it might have been, I think it might have been Dave or somebody else who was saying like, old geezers when they're like, oh, back in our day, all we had was like dice made out of coal, and we had one book between 70 of us and stuff like that. It's not sort of like that, but I am quite envious of the fact that people who start GMing now, there's so much advice and so much sort of stuff that's easily available, so that no one nowadays really has to go through the irritation of like starting entirely from square one. You don't have to make a lot of the very basic mistakes that we sort of did back in the day, when there wasn't YouTube and books out there of advice, and you had to sort of do stuff and then go, oh, that went a bit tits up. All right, okay, how am I going to sort that out? So I'm actually quite envious of people sort of coming into the hobby now because they've got a lot of support.
But moving in the circles, let's just talk about Anchor. I make no other assumptions.
Never heard of it, mate. Never heard of it.
But I'd love it if someone just said, "Oh, I just like playing." Actually,
well, that's me, isn't it?
Because actually, we're all the people. For the most part, it's quite refreshing when it's not the case. But we're all the people who we want to GM. We always wanted to be GMing. I mean, I was GMing before I even knew what role playing was. I picked up the Riddling Reaver, and I was GMing because I was trying to discover what this book actually was. And it's quite refreshing when you actually find people who just want to play.
I mean, I quite often will play 15 to 20 hours a week.
And if, like Colin, you've been affected by compulsory overplaying games syndrome, you can contact us at purplewormpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm way much of a player. way more of a player than I am a GM, but not for want of being a GM. It's just I don't get a look in.
Well,
I think
just going to point. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say that's one good thing about the online players. I mean, I've always been a GM, so getting with online now, I'm getting a lot more chance to play, which is quite liberating from being a GM.
Yeah.
I was just going to say to people, obviously, if you're playing along at home with a Dave Aldridge influencer bingo, that's the Riddling Reaver available on eBay for a very reasonable price. So you can take that one off your card.
So I got a question for Spence. You're new to the online scene. You're getting a few plays under your belt. How are you finding it, Spence?
Really, just really welcoming, really easy to get on with. It did take me kind of an embarrassingly long time to actually jump into a game, and I've got to give a shout out to Jason of Nerds RPG Variety Cast for actually kind of goading me into actually doing it, and just making it so easy for me to just jump in.
It's that fear the first time, isn't it?
Yeah,
Not knowing what to expect.
And I think that's a very good point, Spence. I mean, I certainly know for myself, when I was first getting involved in like making YouTube stuff about RPGs, I'd sort of looked at it and I'd been like, I'm not sure if I can do it. I've not done anything like this before. And it was a guy in one of the communities I belong to called Tim who goes by the name of like Samwise 7 RPG online, who'd made a lot of YouTube stuff. And he said to me, he was like, oh, it's dead easy. All I've got is I've got a webcam. I talk a bit about RPGs. I record it. People send me messages. I respond to them. And I just recorded like a quick video thinking, we'll see how it goes. Put it up. And him and a few other people responded to it, got a bit of conversation going. So I think it is one of the great things about the hobby in general is if you put stuff out, if you put yourself out there a little bit, people in general, I mean, there's knobheads in like every community, but people in general will sort of reach out and embrace people who are new to the hobby, who are trying out podcasting, YouTubing, stuff like that, and will sort of say to you, like, oh, well, have you thought about this? They'll engage you in conversation, and once you've sort of got your foot in the door, it's easier to open the door the rest of the way and move through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I definitely found that with the podcasting, online gaming to a certain extent, but with the podcasting, you can't come on Anchor. I was quite early in there, but there was perhaps half a dozen people that I was calling into, and you were welcomed. Some of them are not doing it now, but welcomed in. You got feedback, instantly got feedback. And it seems like that has become almost a tradition now. Every time there's a new podcast crops up, and where else do you see that happening? You know, it's kind of rare, I think, and it's cool.
And I also think the Audio Dungeon Discord's been good. I mean, up until now, I've always been anti-Discord. I didn't like it, but I think there's a real good community behind the Audio Dungeon Discord.
Yeah, I mean. That's what I found. You know, we just build each other up. You know.
One of the, like as I said earlier, one of my favourite things about Anchor is the voicemails, the call-ins. 'Cause it gets like a dialogue going, and I very much see the Audio Dungeon Discord server as an extension of that, because quite often you'll get someone will post a link to their episode, or someone will say, oh, I heard Spencer's latest episode, I heard Spike Pit's latest episode, and there were Spike Pit was talking about burning oil or whatever. I mean, that's my favourite example of it, because from like a small episode, how many like episodes and like call-ins and conversations on the Audio Dungeon, and if you put all of the material that came from that together, it would be a massive volume of material. And that was just from you sort of like pushing that boulder a little bit at the start, and it rolling and like picking up other people and conversations as it went on. And as Dave's saying, it sort of built up that discussion, so it wasn't just one guy talking about burning oil, it wasn't one person talking about this, it was lots of other people bringing their viewpoints in and sort of throwing ideas into that big pot, and it becoming more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's good how that works. Amazes me. And the topics that run away with, get legs and go, are often the ones you just don't imagine are going to do that. It's crazy.
I think the other fear about online gaming is you don't, if you haven't played online before, you don't want to jump into a campaign where other people are playing because you're the newbie, and
yeah,
I think that's that fear, isn't it, of jumping in? Don't you think, Spence?
Yes. Well, certainly, maybe not so much. Well, I haven't had the experience with online gaming, jumping into an existing game, but Evil Jeff invited me to play by post in a game that's been going for a while, and I'm reluctant to kind of just jump in there into an established group,
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the beauty of quite a few of these one shots that are running on the Audio Dungeon.
Yeah.
People can jump into a system, and a lot of people can't commit, can they, to every Friday night or once every 2 weeks? They've got busy lives. So I think a one shot, you can get your 2 or 3 hours gaming with different people and sort of experience it.
I think it's the same with role playing as with anything. When you're moving outside your comfort zone, it's quite daunting at first. I mean, I know for myself, as someone who came in and when I first started, it was like, all right, you run RPGs as a campaign. That's just how you run them. When people were first like, oh, have you thought about running some one-shots? I was like, no, I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to fit like a decent session in a one-shot. I'm not sure how I'll deal with it. And I had to sort of get used to running games in different ways. Then when it came to running games at conventions, again, I was like, oh, running a game for like a group of people I don't know in like a short time. It's all very different, but again, once you sort of like, you've put yourself out there, as it were, if you just sort of throw yourself in, oftentimes it's not as daunting once you're in as it looks from the outside, if you see what I mean.
Yes, yeah. Certainly, I mean, even coming on here, the fact that I already feel like I know all you guys already makes it a whole lot easier.
Indeed. Well, we've had another message from Mr. Henchman himself on the Twitch, and he says, players clearly outnumber DMs, but on forums like Google Plus, etc., it's often the reverse. There's often more GMs than there are players. And he says, Spencer clearly has a DM's spirit.
Excellent.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I'm not sure how to respond to that, but coming from Goblin's henchman, I guess
I think
I'll have to take his word for it.
Yeah, I think that's a probably accurate thing. Yeah, I think that's an accurate observation.
I also think with this GM and players thing, I think on the OSR there's a lot more GMs around, but with 5e it's the opposite way around. There's more players than there are GMs.
Can we follow that up then, right, Spencer? If you were gonna GM, what would it be? What's the system? I mean, obviously Osseous. We'll put a link in the show notes. But apart from Osseous, if you were gonna GM, what would be the system at the moment? What?
Well, I keep coming back to Into the Odd. It's just something that I keep coming back to time and time again. And I think I may. Yeah, that might have to be it. I was quite excited about Best Left Buried, to be honest. Although I understand the feedback from that has been a bit mixed, shall we say? And I'm quite interested in this thing. I mean, it's quite a different kind of game. This the Shivering Circle.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
It's very, very interesting. I mean, it's only like 60 pages, which I'm a fan of already. Yeah, but it's comes from a very sort of different angle. It's not a kind of combat orientated game, really, or anything like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about that, Spencer, if you don't mind, because as someone who's like a fan of the sort of like the folk horror genre, I mean, myself and my wife, we're massive fans of like the film Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, not the like dank new version, but and that sort of general like sort of folk horror in general. There's a lot of films that have tried to like tap into that, and a lot of stories like fiction that have tried to tap into that, but it doesn't seem to, beyond a few sort of notable exceptions, it doesn't seem to be one of the subgenres of horror that many RPGs, as far as I'm aware, have tapped into. So, what would be your sort of capsule description of a Shivering Circle, and what sort of mechanics does it use?
Well, it's I've got an episode on this where I go into it quite extensively, but it's almost like a balancing act. I mean, the stats are compassion, courage, dignity, health, and hope. So it's much more your psychological aspects of your character that you're dealing with. I think it's essentially a 2d6 system with, advantage and disadvantage as well. And you've also got this kind of mechanism of the stone circle, where depending on how long a game you want to play, you can have a circle of like, I think it's 12 stones or is it 13 stones?
Yeah, 5 to 13.
5 to, yeah. And you as you kind of get deeper into it, you're striking these stones off, and then once they're all gone, kind of that's it, you meet your fate. So it's all very much there's a sense of impending doom to the game. So which is an interesting take.
Yeah, this is what I like. So what I like is that you are going to succumb.
Yes.
This much is known. And, when you fill in all of your stones, that is the point at which you finally realise. And the Wicker Man is the epitome of this. That is the point at which you both meet your demise, and finally it's disclosed to you exactly what was happening to you, the truth of what's going on.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And, I say this as a recent convert to Cthulhu Dark. Colin will vouch. I played this the first time on the weekend, but it's exactly the same movement of that game. You are progressing towards your doom, and the fun of the game is in moving towards that enlightenment of what your doom is going to be.
And am I right in saying that there's not really any combat in that either?
Oh yeah. There's no combat system at all. It is just a system which moves towards this progressive enlightenment, which is also your decay.
You can have combat with non-supernatural creatures, but anything supernatural is going to kill you, isn't it?
Right. It uses the anything else system, but it's got no system.
Yeah, you could fight in it, but it wouldn't be distinct from trying to do anything else.
Yes,
it's just the same. Yeah. I want to throw a punch at that guy. Oh well, roll 1 dice. Oh. Your ex-services trained in unarmed combat, roll 2 dice. And do you want to risk the mythos?
Right. If you want an extra, that's it. If you want that extra dice, then you risk that further disclosure, which brings you closer to your doom. Yeah, lovely.
But it's not a combat system, no.
Excellent. Sounds very interesting. Now, we mentioned Into the Odd briefly. And obviously, I believe the author of Into the Odd is doing the Electric Bastionland Kickstarter. Now, I mention this because I posted one of the Purple Worm podcast links earlier, when I was banging on about layout, as I've occasionally done, like from time to time. I posted up a link to the Purple Worm on Twitter, and the guy who wrote Electric Bastionland sort of posted up a reply, and he was like, "Oh, I thought I felt a disturbance in the force, like someone was criticising my layout choices."
But sorry, Chris.
But I said to him at the time, I was like, if it's any consolation, I've still backed Electric Bastionland. So
yeah.
The tragic thing was, I actually saw him at Dragon Meet there, and I was sat with Dave, and we were just about to go into a panel, and it was at the end of the day, and I wanted to have a chat with Chris, just basically to see how it was going and actually ask him face to face what his thinking was, because it's all well and good people talking about games and everybody patting each other on the back, but if you can't say what you think about something sensibly, then you might as well just don't bother.
See, I wish I'd been at Dragon Meet now, mate, because like you and Dave could have like comedy dragged me into like another room while I was like, "So your margins up."
Yeah. And it's not about compressing stuff or changing the layout. I just wanted to. I'd have liked to have asked him why it needed to be that big old format.
Yeah,
you know, I like to do things face to face, get it from the horse's mouth, and find out more, because it's about learning and discovering what other people, what their philosophy behind it was, and everything else like that. And
and I mean that
call into Spike Pit, Chris, and ask me or tell me what you think.
I mean, to be honest, that's one of the things I like about having these. For example, I've been doing like YouTube videos for a long time. One of the things I like about it is occasionally you'll get someone who like post like a message or a comment, and it'll be like on a video you made like about 4 years ago or whatever, and I'll have to go back and like watch it, because I don't remember making that video. Like, what's in that video?
Yeah,
and sometimes when I watch them back and I see like what my opinions were like 4 years ago, I'm like,
changed.
Yeah, so I think it's nice to be able to. I think, as you said, Colin, opinions and ideas are always sort of evolving and changing, and part of that is sort of trying to appreciate why other people have done what they've done. And I always try, so when I'm doing like reviews and that, I always try and make it clear that any review is just my opinion at the time, and I'm always quite willing, if someone sort of shows that I'm wrong in an assumption or something like that, to just go, fair enough, and I will amend my opinion. And I never mind anyone disagreeing with me if it's part of a dialogue you're having. If it's just someone like going, no, you're wrong, I'll be like, oh, you can get lost. But if someone's talking to you, that's a whole different ballgame.
And so much of it is subjective. Yeah. You're not talking in absolutes. And people are tuning in to watch Red Dice Diaries on YouTube because they want to hear your opinion. You're doing them a disservice if you're just coming along, patting someone on the back because they're your mate or you like them or something like that. You've got to try and give some constructive criticism if you think it's justified. And I'll be the first person to say, come back to me, tell me I'm wrong, because that's how a conversation works. Or not that I'm wrong, but I want to hear your opinion, because if you're listening to the Purple Worm, you are definitely going to hear us disagree. That is on the cards.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is.
Is this the 5-minute argument?
I was going to say, this is Colin auditioning for Panto. That's what that is.
But that's the thing, you know, we've got our opinions, and if I don't like something and you do, that's no big thing, is it? It's just an opinion.
No, it's just that you're wrong, Pete.
I'll say
we're all wrong except Dave.
Amusing little story. I got a comment on a YouTube video, and it was like, someone sent me a comment and they were like, oh, dude, you need to like sort the sound quality out in your video. And I had to say to them, I was like laughing when I posted it, but I had to say to them, I was like, if you look at the date when I posted this video, it was like 7 years ago. I like to think I've made some like alterations to like my equipment since then. So your warning's a bit too late.
Grateful for all feedback.
Yeah, I did say I was like, thanks very much. You know, I'm glad you're interested enough to send me a comment. But it was 7 years ago. I have made changes to my setup.
It's kind of like you've updated and that. Yeah.
But, not to put you on the spot, Spencer, but I gather you're a fairly big fan / looking forward to Electric Bastionland. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
So,
I know I've got. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, what is it about it? So, what we've seen so far of it that particularly appeals to you?
Well, essentially, it's just more into the odd, really, for me. I was kind of a bit. I wasn't too sure about the slight advancement in the sort of technology level with it being all electric now, but. I've warmed to that, and I understand what he's doing in the sense that I wanted to. I had some thoughts about the layout actually as well, because I don't know if you picked up on the fact that it's got a kind of a slight London Underground look to the fonts and just the way things are laid out. And I think what Chris has done is try to go for that kind of control panel instruction manual type look, and where he also likes to break things down into bullet points, generally in sets of 3. So I think that's what's kind of given rise to these big blank areas in the book.
And I've got to stress that I haven't got a problem with the white space. It's just I still think that I could print the PDF off as a booklet using, so it'd come out at A5 format, or well, it would if it wasn't letter. But and I think it'd be fine. I think I would super like it.
Yeah,
It's I've seen it full size, and I just thought, wow, man, big writing, big headers. Not a problem with the white space, because that's John's jam, margins and big white space and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm not an advocate for compressing it or changing the layout.
I think my concern is less the actual space themselves, because I can appreciate from a layout / artistic point of view why you might want to do that. I think my sort of concern with books like this, which are quite big anyway, especially if you think about books that are obviously done to a very high standard, as this appears like it's going to be, when you factor in sort of how much nowadays a sort of deluxe print version of a book can cost, then if you're ordering it on Kickstarter, you've got to think about the postage and packaging and stuff like that on top. And it's easy to see in some Kickstarters now. I mean, I was looking at the Onyx Path Mummy the Resurrection Kickstarter that's going on at the moment, and I was considering backing that, and then when I looked at it, the postage and packaging I'd have to pay was as much as the book again. And with the best will in the world, I'm not going to pay twice the price just to get a deluxe version. So that's always my slight concern, is that if a book sort of stretched out, how much is that going to push up the cost? Because for myself, for obvious reasons, I can't, if I've got a book that I want to read a lot, and if I'm buying a book, I probably do, I can't read it as a PDF on the screen without my eyes starting to hurt and getting headaches and stuff. So I pretty much have to get a printed copy, which ratchets the price up. So I think if you say, because of potentially a very valid layout decision, you say, oh, well, we've got an extra 10, 15 pages, how much does that push the price? And I might be wrong, because I'm no expert on page counts or anything.
I'll put it more brutally than that. I think you're absolutely right, John. For the number of words that's probably in that book, he could have made it smaller and done it for 20 quid. And then I reckon he'd have sold it to everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot of money to shell out on. It's not about the white space, but it's in terms of words to book, it's a 40 quid book.
One of the strengths of sort of OSR games in particular for me has been the fact that obviously I like the Dinky Digest size anyway, because it's easy to carry around to cons. But another advantage of that is that a lot of the books are available fairly cheaply, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of P&P nowadays is based on the size of the book rather than the weight. These dinky books, they're more cheaply available, they cost less to move around. So you can get a lot of OSR stuff sort of very cheaply, especially when you bring in zines and stuff like that. So I think it's more, especially with people having less money in general, and things being a bit sort of people having to watch the purse strings a little bit more closely. I think it's more difficult to justify sort of splashing out on an expensive book in the first place. And if then you say, well, effectively 50% of every double page spread is just a really nice, but effectively just a picture, it becomes even more difficult to justify it. And I can see the rationale of the author, because I know he said that he was producing the game that he'd want.
He wants, yeah, man.
And that's fine. I understand that as a rationale. And like I say, I've backed it anyway because I'm in the fortunate position of, at this point in time, I had the money to back it. However, if it was a case of I was like, I'm maybe struggling a bit to make up the money, and I had the choice of that or a sort of cheaper digest size OSR book, I'd have probably gone for the digest size one just because I can buy that and still have enough money left for my bus fare home.
Did you go for the PDF then, did you, Colin?
No.
You haven't backed though?
I haven't yet, purely because I want to see the finished thing, because I don't really want another PDF, and I down the line, if I like the look of it, I'll just pick up the PDF and print out a smaller one. If it's too big, I'll print it out. If I like it, I'll buy it there and then. I'll go to Dragon Meet next year, and if it's good and it's popular, there'll be a copy there. If it's gone away, then how good was it?
I mean, I think what sold me on it was, first of all, getting a copy of Into the Odd that I know that you guys recommended to me. And initially I was a bit sort of like sceptical about that. And then when I got it, I was like, do you know what? It's actually fairly tasty, this. I could see me running this, certainly for like a pick-up game. I like the look of that. And then the fact they offered the sort of the free like sample PDF on the Kickstarter. And I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, I would like it a bit smaller and maybe a little bit cheaper, but I do like what I've seen, and it almost had a sort of like, I suppose, like Neverwhere-ish sort of like vibe to it for me, like you say, where it made those sort of those comparisons to like London, and it had that sort of urban/electric vibe, which actually sort of, I know you said, Spencer, initially you were a little bit sceptical about that, but that's part of what actually sold it to me, because I was like, that's something I've not got in any of my other OSR books, so I'm potentially willing to like shell out a little bit more for that.
The thing is, the kind of almost ironic thing about it is, I really like Into the Odd, and the second edition is competing against the first edition for me, and unfortunately, I'm like, actually, I'm going to stick with my original kind of Victorian-ish London thing. So that's a good fit.
Perfect system for it, yeah.
Yeah, with the free PDF, you can always take some of those rule changes anyway and put them into the Odd.
Yeah. So it's just,
Well, I mean,
I don't really need it at this point, but I'm open to being sold on it later. But I'm gonna miss the Kickstarter. That's just
well, like I say, I mean, I've got a hard copy of it ordered, so perhaps that once I've read it, maybe that's something else we could potentially do as like a Purple Worm actual play, just to. Instead of just like reading it and giving a bit of a review and saying like, oh, this is what we think having read it, maybe sort of do like an actual play, like a one shot. So I always think you get an entirely different view once you've played something as opposed to just reading it. But I can also appreciate the fact that if you've got a lot of books to review, it's not always possible to like play lots of games of them before you have to do the review.
Have you backed it, Dave?
What, Bastionland?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah,
couldn't help myself. I want it on my coffee table.
Yeah. See, as much as I love the sort of the smaller digest size books, I do also like the coffee table books. Like I've got a Zweihander Dungeon Crawl Classics, Sword and Swordsman of Hyperborea.
Zweihander I wouldn't put on my coffee table. It couldn't support it.
That's it, man.
You
have to like bend with your knees when you pick that bad boy up.
Yeah. Like this coffee table would balk at that.
Yeah, I like them books, but they just don't get to the table for me, so I've had to rein myself in, Yeah,
I mean,
maybe for Christmas, eh? Maybe get it for Christmas.
Oh,
yeah.
Now we're segueing. We're getting into.
Was that heavy-handed? I don't know. Maybe it was too heavy.
I was going to say, I think just a couple more things to wrap up our sort of our episode focused on Spencer and obviously going into related topics. I've got written down on a note, Spencer, that you're a fairly big fan of films and that you've worked as a projectionist before. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. I was a projectionist for about 20 years. Worked in view multiplex, so not art house or anything, but essentially it means that I've sat through a lot of films I wouldn't readily sit through, but yes, yeah, I'm a film lover, and I think ever since I was a kid I was always fascinated by what was going on
And
up through that little window.
It wasn't naughty films, was it?
No.
Naughty.
Naughty.
Yeah.
Right, Ebenezer, good. Now, I have heard a little rumour that you may be a fan of Terry Gilliam.
Oh yes, I've
Brazil!
I've been on
What
about
a
him.
fabulous film, Brazil.
Yes, that's a top of my list. Really, it's a very
That's one of them films.
influential.
What's one of those films that it ends about 6 or 7 times? You think, oh, it's finished, and then it carries on, doesn't it?
My only problem about the film Brazil is you come out with less hair than you went in with.
And greyer.
But I mean, I totally get that it's not for everyone. I don't think my wife sat through the whole thing, but
Okay, and also
Have you seen the Quixote one yet?
yes, I really like that. I thought it was really good.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And obviously, we know recently, Spencer, that you've started playing in Dave's Black Hack game that he's running. So obviously, no pressure given the fact that Dave's in here with us. How are you finding that at the moment?
Really, I'm really liking the Black Hack. I think I had said as much on a recent episode. Just those little things going on within it that don't really look like much on the page, but when you're playing the game, they really have a cumulative effect to really kind of give it a lot of flavour, So yes, very much a fan of the Black Hat.
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself personally, playing in Dave's games is one of the things that's recently got me to reevaluate my whole sort of view on reviewing games without having played them, because I know from having just read Black Hack 2nd edition, I was like, no, I'm not sure if I like it as much as the 1st edition. I can't really see what this is going to add. But then having played it, I was like, oh right, yeah, I see why that works. I get why the usage dice are like worth having. It makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I'm still not completely sold on the armor usage dice though.
Yeah,
but
armor is busted. It is.
Yeah.
What?
He hasn't acknowledged it. He won't acknowledge it, but it is busted.
What's up with armor? I've got no problems with armor.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I don't understand what the issue with it as well. I'm just like
shields and helmets, as written, don't make sense, right? They are bizarrely nerfed for that more heavily armored combatant. That's the thing. I mean, the game is tipped against heavily armored combatants, and I'm fine with that. In all the fantasy literature I enjoy, you never put on full plate anyway, or only very rarely if you go into a fight. And then it doesn't matter if you break the armor because you're going to do something else afterwards. But as written, helmets and shields being treated the same way as your full plate armor means that you are much worse off with your full plate helmet and shield than if you had a cloth helmet and shield instead. So that's the problem. The helmets and shields don't make sense.
But I never read it as they come with the armor. I always, because that's where it wasn't clear. You could interpret.
He's clarified. I mean, Pete asked him, and he clarified the less positive reading. He clarified that they are treated as the armor.
So they've got the AV of the armor.
They're just extra armor dice. Yeah, he clarified that.
And
I think he made a mistake to do so. Yeah, they should be treated as their own thing.
Their own thing.
One and done.
One shot, yeah.
Because they're dirt cheap to replace. Yeah.
And
apart from that, the system is gorgeous.
And going back to what John said about reading and playing, I was the same with Best Left Buried. I read it and I thought, yeah, this is the game for me. And then when I played it, something didn't quite click. It might be the second time. Yeah, maybe the second time I'll have a different view of it. But quite often playing a game and reading it is quite different, isn't it?
Well, that's what straight away made the alarm bells ring for me. Firstly, Zach said about he weren't convinced you need to play test games, so that rung an alarm bell.
I agree.
To
That
me.
is bizarre. Yeah, that is bizarre.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if he just maybe misspoke or perhaps that wasn't quite what he meant. Another conversation I could have had and should have had at Dragon Meet. But once again, if Zach was to come across this interview, call into the Purple Worms or any of our individual podcasts and explain to us what you mean by you don't know if play testing is necessary, because that would have squared up what Pete's saying now.
Well, I'm going to say even more boldly, a bit of editing would have helped as well.
Yeah.
Rereading the rules for clarity would have addressed a lot of the issues I think that we've got. But hey, that's the drinking game. Man. We're going to mention editing a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I don't want to knock the guy. He's put his game out there. He's a young fella.
Yep.
He's enthusiastic. He's got some energy. He's got up and done something. I think he maybe could have just cooked it for a little longer.
Yeah.
Knocked it around a little bit and come up with something better. But I think you're going to see developments, a second edition or tweaks and all that. Yeah, it's going to come. It's going to come.
So that's it for this episode. It only remains for us to thank our very special guest host, Spencer, aka Free Thrall from Keep Off the Borderlands. Check out his podcast on Anchor. And until we see you next time, take care, enjoy whatever you're playing, watch out for those purple worms, and we'll see you soon.